says you can hear me out there in Nowhere Land. So that's good.
Okay, got it.
Okay, so apparently we're good. Apparently. Maybe? Okay. Okay. I'm going to have him confirm that. Sorry for the technical difficulties. I don't know why YouTube hates me. Oh, there I am. He is watching me on his Twitch. Okay. All right. So yeah. Okay. Let's start again officially. I'm Jennifer Jackson. I write poetry and short fiction. I write literary stuff, and I have my book out through Quarantia Press almost a year ago already called Domestic Bodies. And that features a lot of talk about disability, cancer, my life in general, loss, because I've had a lot of it. But today, since it's almost Halloween, I thought I would share with you another love of mine, which is speculative poetry. Speculative poetry is just sci fi, horror, fantasy poetry. It sometimes has the tropes of regular genre fiction, like vampires or werewolves or whatever, but it doesn't necessarily have to. It can just be a vibe or whatever. It's quite a liminal thing that people can't pin down. And there was a discussion about what constitutes speculative poetry one year when something published in Strange Horizons, which is one of the premier venues for horror, sci fi, fantasy poetry, and fiction, actually was told it's not, one of their selections was not going to be eligible for an award because it wasn't like hardcore this or that. And it was like, does the language count? If I compare like something to death and I run with the metaphor throughout, is that speculative poetry? That's something that we're arguing about to this day, I suppose. I just think the fact that you can't pin it down entirely is a great thing to have. Because if we decide to stake it to the ground like a vampire, we cut ourselves off from exploration, from the necessary branching that can come from such a massive, broad, every other kind of cliche in this field. But you don't have to worry about that with mine. So, my first selection is entitled Trick slash Treat. Bells ring in the smoke tinged air. Frost crunches as children call across lawns and clogged streets. Tiny hands peel beneath a blue moon like tarantulas molting. A song strikes out in chimes, a promise of Christmas. The children, silent after coagulating together, slip into doorways demanding treats or entry. Residents dare not check their irises until the last chime peals. I live in a town that doesn't like having Halloween trick or treat on Halloween itself. And I think they do that so that the kids can have like the weekend, eating candy and partying and whatnot. But part of me thinks it has to do with the fact that this town is a little bit, I don't want to say superstitious, but there's a lot that comes with hardcore Christianity sometimes. And more than once, I've heard a town, or a church in town, excuse me, peal their church bells during trick or treat or during Halloween, as though the bells will keep them safe for whatever comes across the veil. So that poem was first published in Grimsby a number of years ago. I hope to goodness you didn't just get a big chime because I had Java update on me for some reason. We have this computer on all the time, but of course, today is the day, correct? My second poem comes to you from a defunct publication called Lakeside Circus. It is called Black Butterflies. Follow the black butterflies as they glide, bigger than bats, through an evergreen forest. Stick fingers out, small branches all, and okay, so that they may drift close and coat you in tar-like splotches they leave behind. Hear the high-pitched screams, signaling intent to feed, how the wild ambiance lies dead, how one screeching tone is yours. Let yourself be carried limbless by 100 onyx blooms near sunset, taking you heavenward. The poems I'm reading you today are from a collection I have. It's still in manuscript form, called Blighted Feast. For those of you who follow my blog, you'll know that I've had 3 chances to publish Blighted Feast. The first time was in 2017. I was going to do it myself through a reputable self-publisher that offers like a suite of services because I won a contest. And I couldn't get my manuscript out in time because I had just been diagnosed with my first cancer. The second time, I received a contract for a solo entrepreneur who was doing his own thing, and it was from the Poet's Haven. And shortly after he accepted it, he disappeared. And I didn't know till like 2 years or so later that he had passed away unexpectedly. And because he was depending for his business and his work, it took a lot of digging to figure out what was going on. And the third time was from a press I shall not name, but I ended up having a very long contract with a lot of inaccuracies and red flags. So unfortunately, just this year, I had to walk away from that. I kind of feel hopeless when it comes to speculative poetry as far as my future with it because, especially horror, there are a slew of magazines out there waiting to eat up your words. They love it. They'll even pay for it. But when it comes to a whole book, a whole project, unless you're like Edgar Allan Poe or you want to do an anthology, it just doesn't happen generally. A lot of places that publish like short fiction collections will not publish poetry. And Blighted Feast is a very weird length and has a problem with the fact that it is a hybrid manuscript. So that means I have a lot of poetry, but a few flash fiction pieces because I write both. So I'm not sure if this will ever see the light of day. But I have a cover picked out for it and everything. So maybe someday, but I'm not sure. This third poem is called Sacrificial, Loved, and Damned. You are my shepherd, and I am your flock. Your fingers delve into my white, ride the waves. I nibble offerings from your palms upheld to the sun like a blessing. You lead me, crooked cane our companion, across rock and meadow to streams running clear as sandwich bags. I drink. You watch and smile, a waning crescent moon. Your knife, a diamond star in your back pocket, whispers free. I lie in willow shade that mimics dusk. Sacrifice, the leaves rustle, and I suspend my breath with knowledge. You are my shepherd, I your flock. And that was published in Quarencia's first horror anthology. And Quarencia is the one who put out my collection. When they said they were going to have sorry about the wrestling, when they said they were going to have an anthology that had horror in it, I was like, yes, sign me up, because why not? I loved working with them the first time. I think they are doing awesome things. I recommend them to a lot of disabled people or just people in general that I feel have something important to say. I have my manuscript for Blighted Feast out to them right now. I don't think they will accept it because they don't seem to publish that much in the way of horror as far as non-anthology collections. I mean, fingers crossed. I loved working with them the first time, but if it's not right for a press, it's just not. And as a writer, it's one of the things you have to do is just accept some things just aren't meant to be. Okay, the next one, it could be considered a prose poem, which is just, I don't know how to describe a prose poem. It's very lyrical, very, I don't want to say sprawling because it's usually very self contained, but it feels like flash fiction that's incredibly lyrical, metaphorical, and there is, again, I don't want to keep using the word, but a kind of liminality to the space. I didn't used to like these kind of poems, and then I fell in love with them because the baby of flash fiction and free verse poetry, I feel, is the prose poem, but this also might be flash. Ghosts of the Manor. She coaxed the docent to the outdoor kitchen with the scent of century-old fresh baked bread. His stride broke from upstairs bound as he reached for the carved knob. A face under his palm shifted in shadow camouflage, a sliver or wooden tooth embedded in his love line like a rickroll. It snowed in the night and grew so cold even breath became a ghost. The cook sang of the dead, a melody of winter and herself. The docent turned at the sound and tumbled down the icy steps like a handful of dice, all snake eyes. The cook added him to her song as she floated to his carcass, sizing up the juiciest portions. And that was published in Paranormal not overly long ago. I feel like everything that expands in speculative poetry could also be contained in most of literary. And I feel like, again, going back to the defining of genre, that we need to start putting more of the speculative elements in literary. Because a lot of speculative poets, they will employ every trick in the book, every tool at their disposal to build the house, and they will do so quite well. But when it comes to literary, a lot of literary writers and poets in particular, they tend to eschew genre everything. When you go to college for writing, a lot of times they're like, you're going to write the next great literary novel about a woman rediscovering herself. And it's like, yes, cool. And what if I want to do that during a zombie apocalypse? And it's like, no, nope, why would you want to do that? Like, we don't do that here. And there are a couple of universities now who actually do have a concentration in genre writing. But for the most part, you're looked at as lesser. You're looked at as it's fluff, you're settling. It can't be highbrow, which not everything you do has to be highbrow. It can just be fun. I think a lot of art does different things. And it's like listening to my baby brother talk about when he goes to art school, because he is a painter and a damn good one. He will talk about how this piece of art or writing will elevate or not. And I said to him, sometimes things are for the beauty, things are for the escape, some things are for the political commentary, some things are for a bunch of different things, and sometimes it's a conglomeration of things. You can do more than one thing with a piece of work. There is a lot of genre fiction that also will take on oppression, will also take on the horror of misogyny, the horror of being gay or trans in a world that doesn't readily accept you. So it can do multiple things. I'm going to give you a kind of an example of a movie right now, but Nightmare on Elm Street, I think it was 5, had a disabled person or two, or throughout the franchise maybe, but there was one who was deaf at one point, and there was one who was in a wheelchair at one point, and I think they were both in the same movie. And it's like when Freddy gave them nightmares, he gave like one the ability to walk, and then like a wheelchair that was decked out in spikes and metal, like all of it was metal, and it was just barreling at him like some kind of wheelchair Iron Maiden in a way. And I'm not even going to go into what happened to the deaf person in his dream, but I think there's a lot to be said that things are written a lot in the lens of disability through an able-bodied lens. What I mean is like Okay, let me pause here because I know I just used lens twice. They're filtering out our lives in a way that causes our filter to become inauthentic, if that makes sense. So when you have a an able-bodied person writing about disability, a lot of the time the disability, the disfigurement is the horror. Like the wheelchair in the hallway that's, otherwise empty, and the person's like walking along, and then all of a sudden, oh my goodness, an empty wheelchair. Isn't that frightening? I have two. They're not frightening. I think I've said that before on this channel, but it's just one of many examples. Like body horror, like disfigurement being like the worst thing or the scary thing, and it's for shock value. So I believe that disabled people have a lot to say on horror, whether or not it takes on anything deeper because of how we are looked at and perceived many times in society as something pathetic, grotesque, disgusting. And a lot of horror actually will perpetrate that it's really bad to be us. Okay, the fifth poem was first published in Merrill, and it's called Gretel on the Couch. I believe it's considered a dark fairy tale. For $125 an hour, she talks about her dreams. For $400 more, she gets liquid to make her sleep. A holiday coma feast on a spoon. No pills, never, because they look like candy. She can't stomach sweet stuff anymore. Can't stand being stuffed to pop, swollen and sore. Her therapist asks about her brother, her twin and light, but she left him in the cottage of his mind, hanging out on rafters. She can't cut his rope. Around December, she becomes an atheist. The smell of gingerbread, the screaming scent of a godless world. Roasting meat and burning hair are redemptive keys to hell. And every time she laughs, she swears she hears the witch behind. Okay, Hansel and Gretel. And if this is kind of considered dark fantasy, because I take it from the actual fairy tale. But I always wondered, and one of the things they don't really discuss much in horror itself is how it impacts. Like, you go through a traumatic event, you survive the vampire, you kill the werewolf, you send the mummy back with reversing the hieroglyphics, whatever it is. They don't talk about the fact that you'd probably still have nightmares, be medicated because of PTSD. They don't talk about how it changes your sleep patterns, how it makes you have an anxiety disorder, you're now hyper vigilant and whatnot. And I think horror can actually be a good vehicle to discuss that kind of thing. But we always see like the hero guns blazing and nothing ever matters and they're fine and they go off to do like 7 sequels, and with nary a nightmare, with nary a disruption. They just like carry the flamethrower on them for whatever happens next, and they just make friends and get married and have a normal time. But it's not easy. It's not that easy when you survive a traumatic event. And I know it wouldn't be as fun if we actually thought, oh, what's actually going to happen to that character that actually got, half dismantled by this like killer somewhere. Like, they don't really show this person like surviving the best way they can after becoming newly disabled or after acquiring a new mental health condition that needs management. And I know, like I said, it wouldn't be fun because we all want to be that Superman, that Man of Steel, that person who just goes out and figures out everything and doesn't have to worry about it. But that's not how most of us are wired. I want to bring this back at the end, but I have one more poem to read. The last one comes from Chamber Mag. So Chamber Magazine. It's called Guests from the Place Where Darkness Eats. They knock, intense, insistent woodpeckers or hopeful guests, unseen as air currents. Walls rattle with ripples of force, doorknobs unturned. They don't need you to get up, just extend an invite. Yes, come in, join me, stay. They are easy to please. Kind words once will do forever. They'll never leave, and you'll no longer be alone. There's a rapping, there's a tapping. We're all in isolation now. Will you answer? Of course, I wrote that during the everything going on with COVID, which most people think is over, and I will forever go out with a mask on my face because no matter how in good shape you are, which I'm not, there's always a risk. So I want to come back to this thing about being broken, or not broken, but altered, or broken and put back together with horror. One of my favorite subgenres of horror is zombies. And zombie movies are plentiful, and they have to handle them in a different way, or it's the same kind of zombie. And when you talk zombies, it's like, okay, either the fast or the slow ones, blah, blah, blah. But I want to discuss one of the originals, and that's Night of the Living Dead, George A. Romero. And in the first movie, Night of the Living Dead, we have Barbara, and her brother are going to a graveyard, I think to see their mother or something, their mother's grave, and there is a zombie outbreak. And when Barbara gets to the farmhouse in the movie, because, that's where they end up, where they make their stand, she actually breaks psychologically in a very bad way. And she's very upset and can't really do much, and she's just so panicked. And I think I didn't like Barbara when I was a kid because I'm like, do something. You're in this situation, do something. But as I get older, I realize how much more nuanced that is, to have at least one person be not okay with watching their brother turn into a zombie or get eaten by a zombie, and watching the world in real time go to hell. And then they remade the movie in, I think, 1989 or 91, somewhere in there. And Barbara was not the same woman. Yeah, she got upset when she saw her brother get eaten and the world go to hell. But when Barbara broke in the new version, she broke in the way that I'm going to get guns. We can just walk past them. Like, she became almost militant in her break. Like, at first she's just like this mild mannered, whatever woman. And then she's like, take charge, we're going to go. And I think that is an interesting thing they did. And I always loved the remake better than the original. I can't believe I said that, but it's true. And the reason is because Barbara did break, but she put herself back together. And she did what she could to survive. But is the original Barbara a little more realistic? Because it kind of depends on the person. And there's something to be said for the fact that one of the women is the one who broke and got and then there's something to be said for a lot of things. And the original one, I believe, was more political than the remake. And that has to do with like our, only black person in the story. And in the original, the black and white version, he is the only survivor. And then when the vigilantes come in, or the militia, to take out the zombies, they do not wonder 1 second whether that black man walking through that house is an undead or a living person. And they just take him out. So he went from being the only survivor to no survivor, and it was humans who took him out. And a lot of zombie movies actually deal with, and shows deal with the fact that, yes, while the world is going through an apocalypse, that we are often some of the worst threats to each other. And I think that's one of the reasons I like the genre. I don't like when they downplay the zombies too much because I'm here for the zombies, but I also understand it. I understand the difficulty that we can face with each other, and how even without an apocalypse that we can make each other not feel safe, protected, valued. and how a lot of times, especially in my country, we feel like we are owed everything but nothing, because we have this whole the individual is right, individual is, our individual freedoms trump whatever we can do as a society, as a group. And that instead of communal care, where we all pitch in and help each other and there's reciprocity because we want everyone to thrive, it's I got mine, get lost. I got mine, whoopity do for you. I got mine, work harder. And I think about that in like emergency scenarios, how you will see a huge dichotomy between those people who will start bailing out their neighbors, will start searching for people unprompted, who will share their resources, their energy, everything they can with each other, and those who will literally just plan for a world ending event by having like 18,000 guns, because what they're going to do is they're going to take everybody's stuff by force. So all they have to plan on is how they're going to attack people, not how they're going to help everybody thrive, everybody survive. And I think that's a very interesting thing. And I think we don't know who we're going to be until we get there. Like I could say, oh, I'd help people. I would try my best in my limited capacity, but I'm not sure, because nobody can tell you anything until they get there. And I think that's one of the greatest aspects of horror in general, is that we can't truly know each other or ourselves until we get in a particular situation. I know you're like, what does this have to do with poetry? Well, we're talking horror. And I love horror. I could do stream after stream of it, honestly. Different movies, different tropes. But yeah, I'm going to leave you soon. But I want to thank you for spending a bit of today with me. This will be archived. Sorry about the scuff, my misreading. I'm doing my best here. I'm more used to being behind my avatar than in front of the camera. It's been that way for a long time. But I hope I brought something of value to you. I hope I made you think about something. If you want me to do like classes and stuff on speculative poetry, I can probably do that. I've been nominated for a bunch of things. I've been doing a bunch of this, that, and the other for quite a long time. But just because you can do it doesn't mean you can teach it. I've learned that. So I hope you all have a wonderful Halloween. It's my favorite holiday. So let me know what you think, and I will see you in the next video, the next stream, whatever. But please be good to yourself, be kind, and enjoy the magic of the season. Take care. Bye.